This is Algebra 2, 9.3, and we are going to talk about graphing circles. So, starting off with our parent function of a circle, x squared plus y squared equals r squared. Again, the parent function is just the most basic function without any transformations. No movement to the left, right, no elongating, no stretching, nothing of that sort. So the parent function of the circle, x squared, y squared equals r squared. And what we're going to start to do is we are going to, the r is going to stand for the radius. So r is the radius of the circle. And since there's no movement to the right or the left, the center of my circle is going to be 0, 0. Center of the circle is 0, 0. So let's start by graphing a circle, which would be x squared, y squared equals, let's say, 4. So, start with the xy coordinate plane. The center, as I just said, since there is nothing else going on, and I'll explain how something else might be going on, but currently here's my center, 0, 0. And the other side of the equation equals 4. Now, 4 isn't my radius because these two things are, if we set them equal to each other, if 4 equaled r squared and I square rooted both sides, then r equals 2. And so from the center, the radius is 2 units away. 2 units here, 2 units here, 2 units here, and 2 units there. And so it's 2 units every way around my circle here. And then I could graph my circle. The diameter, in this case, would be 4, okay? But the radius is just 2. Now, let's talk about if we were to move a circle or somehow translate it, or some sort of transformation to the right or left or up or down. We are going to have x plus, let's use h squared plus y plus k squared equals r squared. And so we've seen this format before where if we're working with, let's say, a parabola, this h here, since it's inside the parentheses, I'm talking about the opposite of it is going to be affecting my circle. So if it is a positive 2, it's actually moving to the left 2 units. If it's a negative 5, it's moving to the right 5 units. And again with this k, it's also the opposite here that goes up or down. So the h here is going left or right. The k is going to change it up or down. So if I had an equation of a circle such as x minus 2 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals 9. And I wanted to graph this. The two things you want to identify every time that you're working with a graph is the center of the circle and the radius of the circle. So the radius is always just going to be the square root of whatever is on this right side. So the square root of 9 is 3. And the center is the opposite of the first thing here. So that's going to be 2. And the opposite of the second thing here as well. So that's going to be negative 3. Again, another way I can think about this is, okay, this one has to do with x. And it's going to be the opposite. So it's going to be going to the right 2 units. The other piece has to do with y, which is the up and down, and so this one is going to make it go down 3 units. And so I'll just use the same graph again. So I'm going over 2 and down 3, and so here's my center of my circle right here. There's my center. 2, -3 is a point on the graph where the center is. The radius of my circle is 3 units, so there I'm going up, go to the right, go down, and go to the left, and then I can graph my circle here. And there it is, my circle, which follows the equation x minus 2 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals 9. Now, usually when we talk about graphing, t-charts come into play, and they would work here as well. However, you run into some problems because if we think about plugging in a specific number, let's say, 2. If I plug in 2, I'm actually going to end up with 2 different answers, which is okay. So if I were to think about using a t-chart, which again is not the best way to graph circles, but it still does work. So let's say I have x and I have y and I plug in 2. All right, so I'm taking this equation and I'm plugging in 2 for x, and then I'm going to have to solve for y. So when I plug in 2 here, 2 minus 2 squared, that's just going to be 0, plus y plus 3 squared equals 9. All right, so the 0 doesn't matter. I square root both sides. Y plus 3 equals plus or minus 3. So this is where I end up having 2 different answers. I would get y all by itself, so I'd have -3 plus or minus 3. So -3 plus 3, so 0 is one of my options. But also when I plug in 2 for x, I would get -3 minus 3 is -6. And yes, both of those points are on my graph. Okay, so yeah, they could help you figure it out. But again, since I knew the radius and the center, I already found those points a lot more simply. And so I'd recommend, again, each time you simply find the center and the radius of your circle in order to graph it. So let's try one where we work backwards. Let's say we need to write the equation of a circle whose center is 2, 5, sorry, 2, -5, and whose radius is 4. And so thinking about how these transformations will affect it, I'm always going to have an x something squared, plus I'm always going to have a y something squared, and I'm always going to have the radius squared on the right side. And so here's the format that I'm going to follow every single time for a circle. Okay, so let's start with the radius. The radius is 4, so I just need to plug that in for r. So that's going to be 16 on the right side over there. The x has to do with this 2. However, currently it's a positive 2. If I'm putting it into these parentheses, I need to flip the sign. So now it needs to be x minus 2 squared plus, and here it was a -5, and so this is actually going to become a y plus 5 squared. So this would be the equation of a circle whose center is at 2, -5, and whose radius is 4. And so again, we worked backwards this time. Other times we'll be looking at the equation and need to identify the center and the radius. And then if we want to graph them, we put everything together and you plot the center, and then you count out the radius from the center in each direction. The homework is going to be page 629, and that is 3 through 14, 21 through 26. If you have any questions, please just be sure to send me the problem along with your question, and I can answer it, work through it for you or with you. Otherwise, have a great day. Thanks.